Now then, I want a Rolex Explorer 2. However, I can't buy a Rolex Explorer, so what's the next best thing? Building one myself. That's what I'll be doing in this video. I'm going to put a Meteorite dial and a great looking blue GMT hand. I got all the parts from AliExpress, which will be linked in the description. Me showing you the process and of course the final result. Here we go. Alright, this is the watch base that we used from Bliger. Now I would have bought a case and the movement separately, however, it was cheaper this time around because NH34 movements are very expensive right now. I have no clue why, but this case is beautiful. Look at that. Beautiful clasp, solid links and solid end links. Here's all the equipment and the titles of said equipment. I used essentially all of them, even the cushion, which may be off video. I think the only thing I didn't need this time was the ball because somehow, you'll see why. So I removed the bracelet end links just to make it easy to work on, and then I unscrewed the back with my gloves. Look at that grip strength, ladies and gentlemen. So yes, removed it like that. There we go. Of course, finger cuts are very important to prevent any sort of fingerprints. Then I unscrewed the crown, but I made sure that I kept the crown in, and here is why. I didn't show it really clearly, but there's a button you're meant to press via any thin tool. I used a little pick tool that came in my watch kit just to pull out the entire winding stem out of the case. So once I did that, then I could finally take out the dial and the movement from the case. So here we go. From there, you just make sure you dust everything. I managed to cut out a lot of it in the video because that would have been tedious, but make sure you dust the components every time, just a good habit. Then you put the stem inside, and that's where you will set now each hand to 12 o'clock. This will make it easier to pry out said hands from the dial without damaging them, because I am going to use all black colored hands from this build. I used this protecting tool and I got two prying tools, which I forgot to buy actually initially from AliExpress. So I had to Amazon Prime them quickly, and yeah, I pried them out. Didn't show it too clearly, but you guys get the point. Then I used Rodico, a blue tack, which is just used to pick up the hands without having to use tweezers, which may be finicky at times. So there we go, we have the movement and dial. I pried off the dial using one of the gaps on the sides, and there we have it, the NH34. Look at that movement. Now then, there was a metal ring, as you guys can see, on the cushion resting. I wasn't too sure what it was for, however I found out it's meant to be put in between the dial and the movement, just to ensure that all the mechanisms are kept completely fine. I think they call it a date washer or a dial washer, something like along those lines. But I decided just to keep it in the middle of the cog where the hands would be placed, just to make sure everything was all good. I'm not too sure how important they are, but make sure you keep it just to be sure. A lot of videos I did watch never mentioned it, so I was a bit confused. But there we go. Here is the dial. I actually didn't record me unboxing it. Beautiful looking dial. It has a Seiko logo on it, so make of that as what you will. However, I'll be linking one without the logo in the description for obvious reasons. I was so in love with the Meteorite dial. Now I'm going to be prying off the feet corresponding to where it lies on the movement. Now I think that was only the top corner on this side and the bottom one on the other side. Now I used nail clippers by the end of it because this tool did not do anything for my favors. So I used nail clippers. Trust me, nail clippers are probably the best for that. And then you just plop them on the movement the same way you took the dial off from the movement earlier, and you put the stem back on and you set it to 12 AM because that is now where you will be placing each hand. I started off with the GMT hand. I got a solid blue one. So nice. I love the blue against the Meteorite dial. Just brings off that space theme ever so slightly. And use the hand pushing tools, which will be linked down below, just to ensure they're seated correctly. And also double check the alignment. You would then go on to the next day just to see how well it's aligned. And if it's not aligned, you can use the hand pushers or even a plastic tweezer just to make sure they're perfect. So then next I used the hour hand, and the same method, you may have to use a different hand pusher just to make sure that you're not putting too much pressure unevenly. And I think the hour hand was probably the easiest one. And the hardest one, of course, would be the second hand. That is a pain in... Oh, it's so hard. I don't know why. It's so thin, the needle. Look at this. So I did the minutes hand already. It was the same process. But the second hand took a solid 1 hour for me. I did not think it would be the hardest part. Okay, I knew it was the hardest part, but I didn't think it took this much time from the build, which was roughly 3 hours in total. So there we go. Look at that, making sure everything's all aligned. Now, for some reason, my date changes a little bit early, despite lining it up. I don't know if I broke the movement, but I don't really mind it. The timekeeping itself is completely fine, so comment down below if you know why the date might change earlier despite having it aligned perfectly. I'm hoping I didn't do the danger zone, but there we go. Took out the crown, then you line up the dial in the case accordingly. Make sure everything's all good. I probably would have kept the case on the mat just to be sure. It's a bit scary watching this back, but you screw the crown back on. Look at that. Oh, I was so happy, you know, looking at that through. I was so excited. And there were no fingerprints on any of the components either, because I ensured that I dusted it and only used the finger cut fingers. I also used a microfiber cloth by good old Hugo Boss, subtle flex there. And look at that dial. It just looks great. The blue GMT hand as well, perfect. For the price as well, you can't really go wrong. So there we go. I springbar tool the bracelet back on. I really don't like putting bracelets and taking them off, you know. I feel like it's probably one of the worst things you can do. And I also adjusted it to the length, or the wrist length. And I didn't even need that blue little tool there because it was a unscrewable pin as opposed to a push pin. Which I think is the standard for oyster bracelets. And there we go. Look at that. Safety clasp on and on the wrist. Absolutely beautiful. Look at that pink light coming from a monitor there, but great build.